today talking about edge rushers for the NFL draft. Most of these guys, DN slash 3-4 outside linebacker. Very interesting class in general. Before the year began, Kavon Thibodeau was the consensus number one. Then Aiden Hutchinson balled out. Now Thibodeau's kind of falling down draft boards. I've seen guys like Trayvon Walker at 1-2. Some people have mocked him as the best. Yes, a bunch of guys have also popped up as the scouting process has gone on over the past few months. So yeah, this will be interesting. And kind of like wide receivers, I do want to notate sometimes it's one guy may be better than someone else, but it's like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a Vaughn Miller, more of a just a pure pass rusher guy that gets wide, or are you looking for a Cam Jordan who's a big DN who could probably play D tackle at times too, but more of a 4-3 DN that's gonna get after the passer, but also be a cog and set the edge in the run game. So that's important just to throw that out there because it makes I don't know about you, it made the evaluation tough for me at times because it's like, what do I like? But then I had to bounce that out. So yeah, we'll dive right into it. I want you to start off because my number 5 is already gonna. I don't do this for clicks or anything. I'm just saying my number 5 is gonna shock people. So, anyways, though, John, you can go ahead first. Who is your 5th ranked edge rusher for the 2022 NFL Draft? And it'd be funny if you did the same thing, by the way.
I don't think my 5 is necessarily shocking, so I don't think we did. But I'll say this before I go into my rankings. I think this class has a lot of depth. I don't see a Myles Garrett, Chase Young, like that level prospect in this class. So just understand that on the front end. Whoever I have at number 1, I don't view them as Nick Bosa. I saw, I can't remember who it was. I saw somebody out there, it kind of went viral on social media, of a lot of guys saying like, how dare you? Because someone said that Aiden Hutchinson was better than the Bosa brothers coming out. And they were like, you got to chill, dude. Because the Bosa brothers coming out, they were elite level prospects. Anyway, I don't view anyone of that caliber of like Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, all those kind of guys who came out. Everybody knew they were a top 3 pick, top 4 pick locked because they're going to be successful in the NFL. I don't have any of those guys like that, but I still think this is a very deep class, a lot of really good edge rushers. At number 5, and it's really unfortunate that he injured himself at his pro day, I think it was, David Ojogbo from Michigan. Obviously, the injury concern is there. He's probably going to have to miss his entire rookie season. And for that, I don't expect him to go into the first round, but I think whoever picks him is getting an absolute bargain because I think he's a first round talent when healthy. But obviously the injury concerns are going to have him drop. He's probably going to fit as a 3-4 outside linebacker, most likely. He's just crazy athletic, really good range, really good versatility. He's 6'4", 250. He ran a 100-meter dash in high school. He had a 10.93 time. This is once again in high school on the 100 meters. So physical freak. Because he injured himself, we didn't really get to see him do any of the combine and all that kind of stuff. But he's one of those guys who I think is going to be a pass rush specialist his rookie season. They're going to bring him in sort of like Azeez Ojulari was for the Giants. You're not necessarily going to have him in as an every down guy right away. And by his rookie season, I mean, I guess his sophomore season, the first year that he gets to play. You're not going to have him immediately come in and be a guy who plays on every down, but I think he can play on either side. And I think that his athleticism, his burst, the suddenness that he has to his game, I think can really benefit him at the next level. And I think as he grows specifically with his understanding of the game and his IQ, I think that he can develop into a guy who's going to be pretty dominant on every single down. He's a very raw prospect, but his athleticism, his production, I love every bit of it. And I think that even last year, he showed a pretty immense improvement in the running game, which used to be a pretty massive weakness for him. But I think that David Ojogbo from Michigan, like I said, really unfortunate that he got injured, but I really like what I see out of him once he's fully healthy. And I do think that outside of the injury, he's a little bit underrated because he was playing across from Aiden Hutchinson, who I think gets most of the credit for the success of that Michigan defensive line, but I think Ogbo, he was absolutely a force on the other side as well. So he is my number 5. I am really interested to see who you have at 5 now that you said it's going to shock the world.
Not really shock the world, but the general, especially those that come on comments and are subjected to groupthink instead of having their own opinion. I want to know
Instagram comment section.
Yeah, sometimes. Ogbo, I just want to know if Ogbo was healthy, didn't have this Achilles tear, he would have been number 5 for me. But the Achilles thing scares me because that's one of those injuries. Yeah. It's not like the ACL, where the ACL now isn't the big deal. Achilles that's a scary-ish injury. So hopefully he can get back to his shape or to what he was, coming out. But my number 5, it's gonna be the guy I mentioned that was the consensus number 1 coming out of high school, and then now he was consensus going into this year. It's gonna be Kavon Thibodeau.
I really thought you were about to say Aiden Hutchinson, and I think would have been more shocking. But anyway.
Oh, spoiler alert! Aiden's somewhere at the top. But
yeah, I figured that one. I would have been like, wow.
Kavon is just at 5 here. He was I want to say disappointing. I try not to let outside noise, factor into when I'm watching someone, but it's tough, and I feel like that's the reason why he's falling down boards. Because we were told kind of like how in past years, Sam Darnold's the number 1 pick, Matt Barkley, or also who was the other kid? Spencer Rattler. Remember, he last year everyone's like, oh. So I feel like he was unfairly put up in that stratosphere, and then so when I watched, I was expecting, number 1 like Myles Garrett, like you mentioned. There's no Myles Garrett chase. I was expecting someone like that. Didn't really get that. He's still a first-round talent to me. I guess I'll start with the negatives. He just doesn't have great physicality that I feel like is necessary on the edge, and that's in the pass and the run game. I feel like he uses finesse a lot. Now, he does have good hands, I will say, but also I just don't feel like he's elite in a certain area. I don't think he's necessarily the strongest guy. I don't think he's necessarily the quickest. I don't think he doesn't have really good bend either. Like I mentioned, like the Vaughn Millers, even Harold Landry coming out a few years ago. Those two, those thinner, because he is more built kind of like a Vaughn Miller. But then again, Vaughn still had more lower body power to him. I think his first step is average. And like I said, I'm not sure I mentioned, but change of direction to we see the guys kind of shake offensive linemen in the pass and the run game. I don't think he's great in space either, so I don't see a lot of position versatility. Like if he is a 3-4, outside linebacker, sometimes you have to stand up, play a little bit of coverage or set. So yeah, other than that, like I said, he's solid all around. You see the potential at times. Like he does, like I mentioned, he has really good hands. He's a strong upper body, but just oftentimes I saw too many times where he'd have a good play or a solid play, and then he get pushed back or dominated for the next 2 or 3 plays by random O-linemen from the Pac-12. So that's a concern. People question his motor. I don't think his motor's the issue. I think that's just an easy thing for people to say that, he's on a great motor. I think his motor's fine. It's actually one of the few pros I had. It's part of the reason why he has a good number of his sacks is because he's chasing, he stayed with the play and chased the quarterback down, or stayed with the run play, got the runner from the other side because they ran away from him. So he's my number 5. It's very tough. Like I said, he's still a first round guy, but I just have questions really about his upside. I think he can still be an NFL starter, potentially a star. I just don't see superstar in him, and like I said, I'll talk about more about the other guys in a second, but I just overall was unimpressed, especially when I compared him to the other prospects in this class. So he is my number 5 edge rusher. Like I mentioned, I have worries about him, so that's why he's at 5. Still a good player, but now I go to 4. And this is where, like, you start getting to your cup of tea. Like, who's your cup of tea? And at 4, I'm going with Jermaine Johnson the second from Florida State. I'll start with the pros. For a guy that's lighter build, plays really well above his strength. When I looked up his, I don't have it in front of me now, but I looked up his height and weight. I was like, man, he didn't play to that. But with that, he's mainly going to be a pass rusher. That's where his specialty lies. He has great bend. I think he probably might have the best bend in the class in terms of of just getting. I think obviously John. I think you know what I mean. But like when you've seen Vaughn Miller, you've seen. I don't know. I just use him as he's the best example. But when he got the lineman on his back, but he still gets around the edge when he's like a foot off the ground, his chest.
Right. It's like when they ride those motorcycles around turns.
Yeah.
They just get so low.
Yeah, but he doesn't lose. But like Vaughn, I think he doesn't really lose his explosiveness or his speed with that. Like I mentioned, twitching quick. He's great at getting off blocks, even especially in the pass game. In the run game, he's solid. Good ability to read the backfield. He doesn't really get fooled often. He knows, I think, because of his measurables and he knows to. He's never got fooled much in the play action game. He knew where the ball was going. But yeah, like I mentioned in regards to the pass rush, he has a variety of pass rush moves. And as the year went on, he actually got better and better in terms of setting up moves. So like, oh, maybe I'm just gonna, one play, I'm just gonna go by you on this end, but the next play I'm gonna fake that and go in and use my hands and jab you in. So he already has great tools, and obviously I think he can learn more. He does play with good physicality. Like that was a knock on Thibodeau. He's not afraid to get it. I don't say get dirty in trenches, but even if he is blocked, to try to throw people off or just create havoc when he is not really getting beat, but when it's more of a stalemate. And then I think he can play. He'll be really good on the edge too. Like I mentioned, he could be an outs in certain situations. Could play a little bit of zone if he really had to. But he's also great in space. Just one-on-one tackling. If he is setting the edge and it's just him and the running back running at each other, most of the time he was able to make the one-on-one tackle because of his great length and speed. Like I mentioned, so Knox, he's not really gonna be an inside guy, and he could get overpowered in some double teams and by some of the more top tier offensive tackles. And then and I'm sorry if I already said this, but yeah, lack of versatility. Gonna purely be an edge guy, whether it's in a 3-4, outside linebacker or a 4-3 end. He's gonna need a Cameron Jordan on the other side, and then maybe the D line to kind of shade his way a little bit to help on the run game. I'm not saying he's a liability, but he's not going to be a stud like some of these other guys that I've mentioned, which is why I have him at 4. I value a little more versatility. It's just easier to have, said guy, oh, you can go out there all 3 downs as opposed to, oh, you come and run off. It's a rundown. So, but he could easily learn and, and get more power to his game. So that is my number 4, Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. What about you, John? Who is your number 4 edge rusher?
Yeah, my number 4, Jermaine Johnson, Florida State as well. I agree with everything you said. So, you said most of what I was going to say. Biggest con for me, biggest negative, it's like you said, doesn't have a lot of power. So I feel like sometimes when he's going to go up against potentially, some of these bigger offensive tackles, he can get swallowed up by the play and isn't really able to make that much of an impact, maybe set the edge, do whatever he needs to do. And that's going to happen at the NFL level. You match up against, the Tyron Smiths of the world who are wearing a knee brace for his arm because he's just a massive man. Like that's what's going to happen. And so there's a lot of big tackles that you're going to be going up against the NFL level that are also incredibly athletic. And so I think that that's something that he does need to work on because, like you said, I don't think he's going to be an inside guy. He's only going to be exclusively on the edge. But the things I like about him, I noticed that he has really active hands. Like he's always moving his hands. He's attacking the other offensive linemen's hands. He's just making things work with his hands, which I think is an underrated aspect of edge rushers. Is there's a lot of hand fighting and stuff that can go on, and you can use that to your advantage if you're good with it. And I think that that's something that he's really strong at, is being quick with his hands, immediately, initiating the contact, making the play happen, and using the opposing offensive lineman's hands against them if he can get there quick enough. Great motor. He's pretty relentless. He's willing to run sideline to sideline. He's pretty good he has good instincts in the run game. I wouldn't say that he's necessarily elite in the run game, but he's pretty effective and is for the most part able to make a good amount of plays there. But overall, yeah, I agree with you. Just doesn't necessarily have the versatility or the just eliteness that I would want to see out of a guy that I'm going to put in the top three. So Jermaine Johnson, he is at three for me, or sorry, at four for me. Kavon Thibodeau is my number three option out of Oregon. I think that he's dropped a bit. I mean, like you said, he was one of those guys who was for a while the consensus number one pick, and at this point, there's some talk that he might drop out of the top 10. Like I said, there's people who are dropping him on their boards. But overall, I still have him at number three because I think that he has a lot of upside. Really long. He's very explosive. He's a great athlete. Like you said, he has a relentless motor. He never gives up on any play. He is always attempting to make something happen. He's got really quick feet. And I think that if he can hit his prime in a game, he's an absolute game wrecker. He can make plays in the run game. He can, get into the backfield and make the quarterback uncomfortable. There's just a lot to like about what he's able to do if he's just able to hit his peak in any given game. The negatives, the knocks on him, I don't think that he necessarily has the instincts of the first two guys that I have on my list, the guys at 1 and 2. I think there's just certain points at which I don't think it's just like an IQ thing, but I think pass rushing, there's just like these little tiny movements that like I was watching when it was Hard Knocks this past year with the Cowboys, and DeMarcus Ware was talking with Micah Parsons, and he was talking about just sensing these kind of little movements that you feel what you got to do next. You feel like his body weight's taking him this way. I'm going to spin this way. He's going like these tiny little things that like these instincts that he had that it's just, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to execute. Boom. He just does it. And it just happened. It was just this natural thing. I don't think that Thibodeau has amazing instincts in that regard. And also there wasn't a lot of film against any elite tackle prospects in this draft class. Like there's a lot of tackles that he could have potentially matched up with in this draft class that either he stayed on the entire other side of them, or when he did match up against them on their side, there just wasn't a lot of great film that he was putting out. Now, it wasn't like terrible film, but he just wasn't the same game record that he was when he was against the other tackles who maybe weren't as good on the opposite side. But I think that if he can put it all together, he can get to the right coaching staff, he can fine tune the instincts, the IQ, all these kind of little things. And you just, like I said, put all that together and he can reach his peak, his prime. I think he can be an absolute beast at the NFL level. Gives me a lot of Josh Allen vibes, not the quarterback, the defensive end from the Jaguars. Gives me a lot of similarities to him. So Kavon Thibodeau, he is my number three. Who's next for you?
All right. So I did 5, 4. Okay. Sorry. I was skipped ahead to 2. So number 3 for me would be George Karlaftis out of Purdue. Kind of like I mentioned with my number 4 with Jermaine Johnson, extremely disruptive. He has great explosion off the line, leads to a good first step. He is pretty twitchy and quick. He has good power, good hands, great at getting off the block. What I like about him too, that why I put him above Jermaine, is a little more position versatility. On third down, he can still kick inside and kind of be a pass rusher for that down. If you really need him to, maybe in a 3-4, he can be a 3-4 DN for a couple of plays, like I just mentioned. But yeah, I mean, he's just he's a kind of a freak show. Another reason too why he's over Jermaine, better in the run game. He's just a bigger human being, more powerful guy than a guy like Johnson, who's more speed predicated. Not that Karlaftis doesn't have speed, but that is one of the knocks. I think he doesn't have great straight line elite speed. It's mainly just good burst and acceleration, short area quickness, which is still good, but not why he's not elite. Also still a little bit raw in terms of pass rushing and just general technique, but that's to be expected. I forget. I know he moved over from Greece. I forget what age. I should have looked that up, but still kind of new to football-ish too. He's only been playing for a handful of years. So I think teams are still getting a raw prospect here, a guy that is still kind of a work in progress. Probably still be situational his first year, but I could easily see him being an impact player down the line. So yeah, basically his position versatility, a little bit better against the run. Why I have him at 3 over Jermaine Johnson the second. So George Karlaftis out of Purdue is my number 3 prospect. And now we go to my number 2 edge rusher. It's going to be Trayvon Walker out of Georgia. Nothing too shocking. Was close though. But yeah, Trayvon's got great strength and power. Probably some of the best initial just burst out of the draft class. Good length too. Kind of like Karlaftis, he can play inside and outside. Georgia did ask him to do that. He has pretty good speed and acceleration for a guy his size as well. Like I mentioned with Karlaftis, great physicality, which is to be expected. He played at Georgia with Kirby Smart, formerly from Alabama. And yeah, like I mentioned, he was the most disruptive overall in terms of run and pass game. Honestly, the weakest part of his game, one of my knocks, was just didn't see him rush the passer a lot. But it's not like whenever I did, it was concerning. It just never didn't get to see a lot of moves and things like that. I mean, he used, and it could be another knock, maybe a little bit raw in the pass game, kind of like Karlaftis, but I wouldn't say as raw. He just didn't get many opportunities to. He's more asked to set the edge and be a run defender or take on double teams. But like I mentioned with Johnson, and Karlaftis was good at this too, but Walker was also really good at reading and recognition in the play action game. Especially, it's college. There's a lot of option. Got to follow the ball. He did a great job of staying disciplined, following the ball, not getting fooled. That is one of his many good traits in the run game. And then the only other knock I really had, which is lack of bend. But like I mentioned, I think he's going to be. I comped him to kind of like a Cameron Jordan. Like he's going to be probably one of the bigger DNs. Can play defensive tackle for a handful of snaps, depending on the situation. May get like 10, 12 sack numbers, but he's going to do so much. But which some people be like, that's his average. I mean, that's above average, but he's going to be a really good defensive end. I feel like for a team for a long time. So he is my second edge rusher for this class. John, who are your top 2? Starting with 2.
This is gonna be a little bit boring because I think we're pretty consensus here. My number 2, and I'll say this: I really wanted to put him at 1, but I just couldn't do it. Trayvon Walker from Georgia. I'll start with the negatives. I don't like the bend, like you talked about. I just think there was a lot of moments in which it felt like if he had that sort of like Vaughn Miller-esque bend, that he would have been able to get a lot more sacks and home to the quarterback. But certain offensive linemen were able to push him off towards the edge, and he just wasn't able to get around that tight corner. In the run game, I think that he needs to work on disengaging from his blocks and just trying to go make the play. I think there was a lot of times that he just kind of got stuck on the guy that he was on, and wasn't able to grab the runner that was right next to him. But outside of that, I think that he's incredibly explosive. I love the versatility. I think there was a point in his career where he's actually a defensive tackle and they moved him outside because Georgia just has too many defensive tackles, and he's a freak there as well. Like you talked about, we're really big guys, probably the biggest out of anybody we've named so far. I think he's like 275. So has some weight, but he does not lose any speed or athleticism for it. He's super quick, absolute monster of an athlete. There was some concerns about his production at Georgia. I'm not really concerned by that because Georgia was just so deep defensively this past year, even the last couple years, that they were rotating players in and out pretty constantly. And like I said, there's points where he was supposed to be a defensive tackle, but because of Jordan Davis, Deontay Wyatt, they just had too many people. So Georgia had the problem of riches, and I think that that's a reason as to why maybe he didn't have like the crazy sack numbers that some people were wanting him to have in college. But regardless, incredibly explosive, Uh, I mean, he's really good at taking his speed and turning it into power pretty instantly. Really long arms, and overall, I think that he's just really good at being able to shoot the gap and win the edge. As long as he doesn't get these offensive linemen who, like I said, are pushing him with their super long reach onto the far edges to where he has to come around a tight corner. I think that's something he can fix, but at least as of right now, I think he could use a little bit of more agility, I guess, on the edge there.
I just want to say
Um,
my only
Go ahead.
my only argument in regards to the run game. You mentioned he gets it was tough because I thought I saw that too. I think Chris Sims on his Unbuttoned podcast mentioned that Georgia asks, or from what he saw, Georgia asked their defensive linemen just to hold the blocks and not
Hmm.
disengage and let the linebackers clean up. So maybe that's just something he was coached to do. I just want to throw that out there potentially for him.
Yeah, I mean that absolutely could be the only. I think it's a mix of that, but the reason that I also think that maybe it's just sometimes him getting a little stuck was because, and I actually failed to mention this. I felt like there was some times that it also happened in his pass rush. Like he didn't necessarily have like a second go-to move, which I think is that he's just a bit of a raw prospect. Like I said, there was points in which he was supposed to be a defensive tackle, so he completely shifted in the way that he was approaching the game from going inside to outside. And I think that as he develops, when he gets these extra moves, he'll be able to do that more effectively in both the run game and the pass rush game as well. But number one, I mean, this is pretty chalk. Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. I'm not going to say that he's the next Bosa, which I know a lot of people are wanting to compare him to. I don't think he's that level, but he's just the most well-rounded out of any of the defensive ends in this draft. I think he can play in the 4-3 or the 3-4. He's 6'6", 260, so he's got the size to do either. Really strong as an edge rusher. Just overall, I mean, he had a fantastic year this past year. I think was he a Heisman finalist? Anyway, he was
I'll
somewhere
look it
out
up.
there. He was winning all the awards. I'm pretty sure he was a Heisman finalist. I might be wrong on that. Um, but regardless, I mean, the guy, he's a physical freak. Um, Incredibly strong, great frame, great size. He was a Heisman finalist. Yeah, and so as a defensive player, that just goes to show how impressive he was this past year in college football. But like I said, physical freak, great speed, great size, great strength, really impressive overall frame, and I think he just puts it all well together. Um, I think that off the edge, he's got that bend that we're talking about, better than Trayvon Walker by far. Really solid in both the pass rush and the run defense game. Um, and I think that ultimately the thing that just really sets him apart from a lot of these other people is he pretty consistently, and I don't want to say like almost every play, but like a lot of plays, the moment that he and the offensive lineman made that first contact, he was the one winning it. There wasn't a lot of stalemates, wasn't a lot of times that he was being pushed back. A vast majority of the time that him and the offensive lineman make that first contact, he instantly was winning the play because he's really good at having that quickness off the line, and then turning that, like we've talked about with some of these other guys, turning that instantly into power to push those guys back once you make contact, and it's no longer about speed. But I think after he's able to do that, he still has a combo of moves that he's able to go to, that, like I said, Trayvon Walker doesn't necessarily have a certain array of moves yet, but I think that Aiden Hutchinson does. And once he's able to win that initial contact, he just has a couple different moves that he's able to go to beat that offensive lineman. So Aiden Hutchinson, I think he's a top 5 lock for sure. And yeah, easy number one.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the Jaguars got tough in terms of the top two, but nonetheless, my number one's Aiden Hutchinson as well. You hit most of the points. Um, really good in the run game. I think it's him and Walker. Yeah, everyone fawns over the 40, but they got some. Look at they had like a rare three cone times for
Yeah.
guys for edge guys. Like that's why like Trayvon Walker's 6'8" and Aiden Hutchinson. Let me pull that. I just had it a second ago. Aiden Hutchinson was 6'7" 3. So they have a mate like, but Aiden Hutchinson, especially for his size, you mentioned 6'7", 260 is what he measured out at the combine. Um, that's elite level, just athleticism in general. But like you mentioned, he's well polished, really good in the run game. Like the others, good read and recognition. Great, he has great hands. He knows how to use them, and can disengage in both the pass game and the run game. Kind of like I mentioned, like some of these other guys have. He has great shake and bake ability to set up moves. That wasn't amazing at setting up moves, but didn't really need to set up many moves. So that could be a good / bad thing going forward. I felt he had okay bend, definitely better than Walker's. So if he needs to, he can get by with that. Oh, only other negatives. Okay, first step. But is that really a negative? And okay in space. Not amazing, but he's good in space. Like, I mean, his size and his agility help with that. But nonetheless, yeah, he had great twitchiness, suddenness, great size, pretty good pass rush ability. Still has some room to grow. Like I mentioned, just add a few more moves and clean up the technique a little bit. But otherwise, yeah, I felt like his floor was just higher than Walker's. Walker's still got a pretty high floor. But obviously Hutchinson, yeah, he's going to be probably a little bit better in terms of both sides, not just the run defense, but pass defense as well. So yeah, he makes my number one. So pretty evened up there for the both of us. Anything else you want to add or throw in?
I think that's gonna be it. I mean, defensive end. I would say this class. I mean, we already talked about with the corners, but this and defensive end, I think, are just so deep that I could see. I think combined, we just named 6 different guys because I had Ojogbo, you had Karlafidis, I think is how you pronounce it. I could see all 6. Well, not. I don't see Ojogbo going first round because of the injury, but I could see 6, 7, maybe even 8 edge rushers going in the first round. There's guys that we didn't even name that I could
Oklahoma
absolutely see
kid
up there.
that Benito, but I may be completely off that name. But there's the Oklahoma kid. I've seen him mocked a few. I watched him. He was pretty good. Mainly just a pass rush though. Like at least Jermaine Johnson, I was like, okay, he could grow in the run game, but
Right.
Benito I didn't put in there because mainly just he's going to be a third down specialist. So, but he could be something else too. I think that was it. But yeah,
I mean, just some other names, honorable mentions. Drake Jackson from USC. He was out there. I've seen him.
That
as a guy
Kentucky
who's
kid
around
too.
5.
I think he's been creeping up the
Yeah,
boards.
there's
I forget his name.
I don't know how to pronounce this last name, but he's from Penn State. Arnold Ebiketie, I think is maybe how you pronounce it. I've seen some people have a first round grade on him as well. I
I've seen
mean,
him
it's
go on
just a very
boards.
deep class.
Yeah, this is. I saw just before we sign off and such. I will say I think there are a few good. I know quarterback's not great, but most of the other spots like this, there's some good. It's a deeper class. And I think I read somewhere they theorize it could be, and I'm sorry I forgot where. Theorize could be due to the last 2 years due to COVID. Some guys are finally got to play football last year, college football, and it's just maybe a plethora of talent in this draft class. So we'll see what happens. But that is our top 5 edge rushers. I'm sure there will be plenty of feedback, especially in regards to mine. But I'm sorry. That's just how I feel. I'm actually not sorry.